The Conjuring, The Amityville Reckoning. Chapter 1, Haunting Beginnings. The Martin family stood before the Amityville horror house, their new home, in the waning light of a chilly autumn day. The aged structure loomed ominously over them, its windows like dark eyes, and its history, shrouded in whispers of malevolence, seemed to breathe through the very bricks. Unbeknownst to them, they had just crossed the threshold into a nightmare. Sarah, a woman in her early 30s with a cascade of auburn hair, stared at the house with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Her husband, John, a sturdy man in his mid-30s, clutched the moving boxes in his calloused hands. Their two children, Emily and Michael, stood beside them, wide-eyed and curious. As they entered the house, a shiver ran down Sarah's spine. The air was heavy with a palpable sense of dread. Michael, a bright-eyed 10-year-old, dropped his backpack, and it echoed in the silence like a distant thunderclap. "Mom, this place is spooky," he said, his voice quivering. Sarah crouched down and smiled, trying to reassure him. "Don't worry, sweetie. It's just an old house. We'll make it cozy in no time." Emily, a teenager on the cusp of adulthood, glanced around with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "I don't know, Mom. This place gives me the creeps." The family's unease was not unwarranted. The previous residents had experienced unexplained phenomena, shadows that moved on their own, whispers in the night, and visions of unspeakable horrors. But the Martins believed that such stories were exaggerations, fueled by superstition. They began the task of unpacking their belongings, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, the house seemed to come alive. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, causing them to creak and groan as if in agony. The room darkened, and the lights flickered ominously. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. "Did you see that?" John looked up from the stack of books he was placing on his shelf. "See what, dear?" "The lights, they just flickered. It's probably just an old electrical system." But it wasn't just the lights. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet, and the air grew colder, sending visible shivers down their spines. As the night deepened, the Martin family retired to their respective rooms, each carrying an unspoken unease. Sarah and John shared the master bedroom, while Emily and Michael were down the hall. It was when they had all settled into their beds, the darkness deepening around them, that the true horror of the house revealed itself. Whispers, faint at first, slithered through the hallways. The children heard their names called softly, beckoning them to come closer. Shadows danced in their peripheral vision, and fear began to claw at their hearts. In the master bedroom, Sarah and John lay in an uneasy silence. The whispering grew louder, words now forming from the abyss of the darkness. The voice seemed to speak directly into their minds, invoking their deepest fears and insecurities. And then, the room went frigid, their breaths forming icy clouds in the air. Sarah's voice trembled. "John, do you hear that?" He nodded, his eyes wide with terror. "We need to get the children." The two of them ventured into the dark hallway, hearts pounding. They approached Emily and Michael's rooms and found the children huddled in the corners, tears streaking their faces. "We have to leave this place," Emily whispered. The Martins fled the house, abandoning their belongings, and found refuge at a nearby motel. The horror that had unfolded in their new home had left them shaken and bewildered. Sarah reached for her phone and dialed a number she had never imagined she would need to call. As it rang, she glanced at her family, who sat huddled together, seeking solace in each other's presence. They had nowhere else to turn, and they needed help. As the call connected, Sarah knew that they were about to embark on a journey that would test their very beliefs and sanity. She said, "Hello, is this the Warrens? We need your help." Chapter 2: The Reluctant Return. Ed Warren stood in his dimly lit study, surrounded by a collection of cursed artifacts and relics of past investigations. He gazed at the wall of crosses, amulets, and religious symbols, reminders of the battles they had fought against the forces of darkness. Lorraine, his wife, walked in, her presence casting a warm glow in the room. "Ed," she began, her voice heavy with concern, "we received a distress call from Amityville." Ed's brow furrowed as he turned away from the wall. The name, Amityville, held a dark weight in their world of paranormal investigations. It was a place that had haunted them, a place they had vowed never to return to. "Amityville," he muttered, his mind racing back to their past encounters with malevolent spirits and demons that had tormented the Lutz family. Lorraine sat down across from him, her eyes filled with a mixture of empathy and fear. "The Martin family has moved into the old Amityville horror house, Ed. They're experiencing disturbing paranormal activity, and they're desperate for our help." Ed clenched his jaw, the memory of the horrors they had faced in Amityville flooding back to him. He remembered the feeling of being overwhelmed by a malevolent presence, the nightmares that followed, and the sense of being helpless in the face of evil. "I thought we'd left that place behind," he said, his voice trembling. "We swore we'd never return." Lorraine reached out to hold Ed's hand, her touch offering both comfort and reassurance. "I know, Ed, but this family needs us. We can't ignore their plea for help." Ed sighed, his gaze fixed on the floor. He remembered their oath to help those in need, no matter how frightening the circumstances. "You're right, Lorraine. We can't turn our backs on them, but we're going to need to be prepared for what we might face." As they prepared to revisit Amityville, the couple's thoughts wandered back to their earliest days as paranormal investigators. They recalled the numerous cases they had taken on, the friends they had lost along the way, and the unshakable bond that had grown between them. The spirits they had encountered, the possessions they had witnessed, and the exorcisms they had performed all had shaped their lives in ways they could never have foreseen. In the dimly lit study, Ed and Lorraine Warren made a pact, a silent promise to each other and to the Martins. They would return to Amityville, confront the darkness that had once scarred them, and strive to protect the innocent family now caught in its malevolent grip. As they began to gather their equipment and prepare for the journey back to Amityville, they knew that this case was different, for the past was entwined with the present, and the malevolent forces that lurked within the Amityville horror house had not forgotten the Warrens. They were about to face their greatest test yet, one that would challenge their resolve and bring them face to face with the demons of their own past. Chapter 3: Investigating the Past. Amityville stood still, its streets veiled in an eerie silence as Ed and Lorraine Warren, driven by their promise to help the Martin family, approached the foreboding Amityville horror house once more. As they stood before the imposing structure, the air seemed to carry the whispers of the past, chilling and relentless. Inside, the Martins greeted the Warrens with a mix of relief and anxiety, as if they had been awaiting saviors from the darkness that clung to the house's very foundation. Sarah, her eyes shadowed from nights of sleeplessness, handed the Warrens a stack of old documents they had uncovered, traces of the house's grim history. "Please, you have to help us," she pleaded. "This place is a nightmare." Ed and Lorraine retreated to a corner, where they pored over the documents, their faces illuminated by the dim light of an antique table lamp. The room was still, save for the occasional creaking of the old floorboards. The papers spoke of the house's dark past, recounting the gruesome DeFeo murders, that had taken place there in the 1970s. But they also hinted at something far older and more sinister, an entity that had lurked in the shadows, manipulating and corrupting the house's occupants. As Lorraine read through the accounts of the DeFeo murders, her fingers trembling, she noticed a pattern. Each of the family members had been driven to commit the heinous act, blaming malevolent voices and sinister apparitions. The connections between the deaths and the supernatural occurrences were undeniable. Ed, meanwhile, uncovered a series of letters from the house's previous inhabitants, the Lutz family. The letters described escalating nightmares, bizarre apparitions, and the unshakable feeling that the house was slowly consuming their sanity. And these occurrences are strikingly similar to what we experienced in our previous investigations here, Lorraine whispered, her voice quivering. He nodded, a deep unease settling in his chest. It's as if this malevolent entity has been feeding on fear and despair for decades. But why now? Why has it become so active? Together, they realized that the house held a connection to a malevolent entity, an entity that had somehow endured the passage of time, growing stronger and more malignant with each generation of inhabitants. It was as if the house had become a vessel for the dark entity's insatiable appetite for suffering. They had uncovered a malevolent force deeply rooted in Amityville, one that transcended the boundaries of life and death. And with each piece of evidence they gathered, the sinister agenda of the entity became clearer. It sought to consume the souls of the Martins and anyone who dared to enter the house. The Warrens shared their findings with the Martins, who listened with a mixture of dread and determination. The truth was undeniable. The Amityville horror house was no ordinary haunting. It was a battle against an ancient evil, one that had withstood the test of time. As the night descended upon Amityville, the Warrens and the Martins were now united in their purpose to confront the malevolent entity that had haunted this house for generations. They were prepared to face the darkness head-on, knowing that their journey had only just begun. Chapter 4: Malevolence Manifests. The air in the Amityville horror house had grown thick with tension. It was as if the malevolent forces lurking within the walls had been awakened by the Warrens' presence, and their fury knew no bounds. The Martins, already battered by unexplained phenomena, soon found themselves plunged deeper into a living nightmare. It began with subtle disturbances, whispers in the night, shadowy figures darting through the corners of their vision, and the unmistakable sense that they were never truly alone. In the dead of night, John would wake to the sound of weeping, only to find Sarah asleep beside him, her face etched with grief. He couldn't help but wonder if it was the house that was pushing them apart, sowing discord within their marriage. Sarah, plagued by relentless nightmares, found herself wandering through the darkened house, driven by a force she couldn't resist. She would stand at the window, staring out into the abyss, feeling the malevolent presence closing in around her. "John, I can't take this anymore," she confessed one night, her voice trembling. "I feel like I'm losing myself in this place." John's concern deepened as he witnessed the toll the house was taking on his family. Emily and Michael's once bright eyes had dulled with fear, and their laughter had been replaced by anxious silence. The manifestations escalated, as if the malevolent forces sought to feed on their despair. Objects moved on their own accord, crashing to the ground with a deafening clang. Cold, unseen fingers brushed against their skin, sending shivers through their bodies. Eerie voices whispered menacing promises, driving a wedge between the family members. John and Sarah's relationship bore the brunt of the malevolence. They found themselves arguing over trivial matters, their frustration mounting with each passing day. The house's malevolent influence seemed to exacerbate their insecurities and resentments, creating a rift that widened with every unexplained occurrence. The Warrens, who had made the Amityville horror house their temporary base of operations, observed the escalating paranormal activity with growing concern. They recognized that the malevolent entity was not content with mere whispers and flickering lights. It craved chaos, discord, and fear. As the nights grew longer and the malevolence intensified, the Martins were forced to confront the grim reality that they were not just facing a haunted house. They were in the grip of an entity that thrived on their fear and suffering. The malevolence within the Amityville horror house continued to grow, and the Warrens knew that they had to act swiftly. The safety of the Martins, and their own, depended on their ability to confront the entity and uncover the dark secret that bound it to this cursed place. The battle against the malevolent forces had only just begun, and the Martins' very souls hung in the balance. Chapter 5: Haunting Revisited. Ed and Lorraine Warren had returned to Amityville with an undeniable sense of trepidation, aware that the malevolent forces they had previously encountered in this place were far from forgotten. The Martins, who had been tormented by the unrelenting hauntings, greeted the Warrens with a mix of desperation and hope. The atmosphere in the Martin home was heavy, like the air before a storm. The Warrens could sense the presence of malevolent entities that had taken hold of the house, their icy grip on the family's lives growing stronger with each passing day. The Warrens' arrival marked a turning point for the Martins. It was as if a beacon of hope had appeared amidst the darkness that threatened to consume them. Emily, her fear-ridden eyes meeting Lorraine's, felt a glimmer of relief. Michael, whose nights had been plagued by night terrors, found himself looking up to Ed, seeking protection from the unknown. "Thank you for coming," John said, his voice laden with gratitude. Ed and Lorraine exchanged a knowing look, their shared history with Amityville casting a long shadow over the room. Lorraine squeezed Emily's hand, offering a reassuring smile. "We're here to help," Ed assured them, his experience as a seasoned investigator evident in the steely resolve of his eyes. "But first, we need to understand the full scope of the situation." The Warrens decided to conduct a preliminary investigation, guided by their years of experience in dealing with the supernatural. They equipped themselves with an array of tools and instruments, from electromagnetic field detectors to digital voice recorders, all designed to unveil the unseen forces that had taken root in the Martin house. The Martins watched in anticipation as the Warrens moved methodically through each room, noting temperature fluctuations, electromagnetic anomalies, and unusual readings on their instruments. In the children's bedrooms, the Warrens listened to the audio recordings, discovering faint, chilling whispers that confirmed the presence of entities seeking to communicate. "Your children are particularly sensitive to the supernatural," Lorraine explained. "They're like beacons for these entities, drawing them closer." As night fell, the Martins, guided by the Warrens, participated in a seance, hoping to make contact with the entities and learn their intentions. The atmosphere in the room grew tense as Lorraine channeled her abilities to bridge the gap between the living and the spiritual realm. The seance was both a revelation and a torment. The entities that had besieged the Martins revealed their malevolence, tormenting the family further with ominous messages and violent poltergeist activity. Sarah, who had been skeptical at first, was now faced with undeniable proof that they were dealing with a force beyond human comprehension. Ed and Lorraine concluded the seance, aware that they had scratched the surface of a darkness that ran deep. The Martins had witnessed firsthand the gravity of their situation, their lives now inextricably intertwined with a malevolent force that seemed relentless. "We're dealing with a powerful entity," Ed said, his voice grave. "It has a hold on this house, and it won't let go easily." The Martins exchanged troubled glances, knowing that they had entered a battle they could not fight alone. The Warrens' arrival had illuminated the true extent of their plight, and the malevolence that had revisited their lives was anything but a mere haunting. As the Martins clung to the fragile hope that the Warrens represented, they prepared for the daunting journey that lay ahead, an exorcism to rid their home of the malevolent entity that sought to destroy their family. The malevolence that had revisited Amityville was about to face the ultimate test, the Warrens' unwavering determination to confront and conquer the forces of darkness. Chapter 6: A Sinister Revelation. With the malevolent forces in the Amityville horror house growing bolder, Ed and Lorraine Warren intensified their investigation, determined to uncover the source of the darkness that had plagued the Martins. They knew they were facing a formidable adversary, but the extent of the malevolence lurking within the house left even the seasoned investigators unnerved. Their exploration of the house's hidden corners led them to an unexpected discovery. In a forgotten attic space, accessed only through a concealed trapdoor, they stumbled upon a chamber unlike any they had encountered in their years of paranormal investigations. The room was bathed in an eerie, crimson glow, emanating from candles placed haphazardly around the space. The walls were adorned with sinister symbols and cryptic writings, which appeared to have been etched into the wood by fervent hands. The air was heavy with a palpable malevolence, like a sinister entity had carved its presence into every inch of the chamber. Lorraine, her psychic senses heightened, gasped as she stepped into the room. "This is where it all began," she whispered, her voice laced with dread. The Warrens examined the room, realizing that it was a place of dark rituals and sinister ceremonies. Blood stains marred the wooden floor, and the walls were inscribed with incantations meant to summon and bind powerful entities. Ed uncovered a series of old tomes that lay hidden in a dusty corner of the room. The ancient texts contained forbidden knowledge, detailing rituals to summon a demonic entity and make bargains with it in exchange for power and malevolence. "The Amityville horror house isn't just haunted," Ed mused. "It's a sanctuary for malevolence, a place where dark entities were summoned and bound to this earthly plane." As the Warrens examined the relics and writings, they made a chilling revelation. They had encountered a name, an entity that was notorious in the world of the occult. A name that sent shivers down their spines. "Malum Vectis." "Malum Vectis," Lorraine whispered, her voice trembling. "It's an ancient demon, a harbinger of despair and chaos. The rituals in this room were meant to harness its power." The discovery sent shockwaves through the Warrens, and their fear was mirrored in the eyes of the Martins. They were dealing with an ancient, powerful demon, one that had been bound to this house by dark rituals conducted by its former inhabitants. The realization weighed heavily on them all. This was no ordinary haunting, no malevolent spirit. They were confronting an entity that had roots in the darkest corners of the supernatural realm, a demon that thrived on suffering and despair. As they left the hidden room, its malevolent presence seemed to seep into their very souls, a haunting reminder of the malevolence that had festered in the Amityville horror house for decades. The Martins were now faced with a sinister revelation, their lives irrevocably intertwined with an ancient demon, and the Warrens knew that confronting such an entity would be a battle like none they had ever faced before. The malevolent force had a name, a face, and a history that was drenched in blood and malevolence. As they gathered in the dimly lit living room, the Martins, the Warrens, and the dark specter of Malum Vectis, the sinister revelation bore down upon them. The battle against the ancient demon had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than any of them had ever imagined. Chapter 7: The Demon's Strategy. With the sinister revelation of Malum Vectis, the malevolent entity that had taken root in the Amityville horror house, the Martin family was thrust deeper into the clutches of fear and despair. The entity's relentless attacks escalated, intensifying its campaign of terror against the vulnerable family. The once subtle disturbances now grew unrelenting. The walls bled dark, viscous liquid that seemed to ooze from the very pores of the house. The temperature fluctuated wildly, leaving the Martins shivering in one moment and drenched in a cold sweat the next. The entity's tactics became more personal, striking at the core of the family's vulnerabilities. It whispered cruel lies into the Martins' ears, exploiting their deepest fears and insecurities. It twisted their thoughts, driving wedges between family members and sowing discord with unrelenting persistence. Sarah, already plagued by doubts and nightmares, found herself doubting John's loyalty, her unwarranted suspicions driving a wedge between them. The entity's influence weighed on her like a leaden shroud, forcing her to question the very foundations of her marriage. John, his own insecurities amplified by the malevolent entity, felt helpless as his family crumbled before his eyes. His relationship with Sarah, once filled with love and trust, was now marred by accusations and mistrust. Emily and Michael, young and impressionable, became pawns in the demon's dark game. It whispered to them, convincing them that their parents' love was false and that they were truly alone in their suffering. The siblings, once close, grew distant, their laughter replaced by the cold silence of fear. The entity seemed to take pleasure in their anguish, feeding on their despair like a vulture descending upon its prey. It thrived on the emotional chaos it had sown, knowing that it was closer to achieving its ultimate goal, breaking the Martins apart and consuming their souls. As the Martin family's unity deteriorated, they grew increasingly isolated within the haunted house. Their shared experiences of the supernatural became sources of division, further isolating them from the outside world. Their once bright and lively home had become a place of terror and darkness. The Warrens, bearing witness to the entity's malevolence, understood that they were facing a formidable adversary. Malum Vectis had a strategy, an insidious plan to tear the Martins apart emotionally and psychologically. Its endgame was to plunge the family into chaos, making them vulnerable to its influence and ultimately feeding on their fear and suffering. Ed and Lorraine Warren recognized that they had to act swiftly and decisively to prevent the entity from achieving its goal. The Martins were not only battling a malevolent demon, they were fighting to preserve their family's unity and protect their very souls. As the days grew darker and the entity's attacks more relentless, the Warrens and the Martins braced themselves for the battle ahead. The entity's strategy was clear, but their determination to counter it and banish the demon was unwavering. The haunting revisited by Malum Vectis had become a battle for the very essence of the Martin family, and the stage was set for a harrowing confrontation that would test the limits of their faith, courage, and love. Chapter 8. The Battle Unfolds. The Amityville Horror House, once a symbol of peace and family, had become the battleground for a confrontation of cosmic proportions. Ed and Lorraine Warren, the Martins, and the malevolent entity Malum Vectis were now poised on the precipice of a climactic showdown. The Warrens, equipped with their vast knowledge of the supernatural, had devised a plan to confront the ancient demon. Their experience in exorcisms, ghost hunting, and their unwavering faith in the face of darkness were their strongest weapons. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a haunting twilight over the house, the Martins gathered in the dimly lit living room. The atmosphere was charged with tension, their faces marked by fear and determination. Emily and Michael, who had once been mere observers of the supernatural, now played an integral role in the battle ahead. Lorraine, the psychic medium, stood at the center of the room, her eyes closed as she channeled her connection to the spirit world. Her voice was steady, her words laced with authority, as she began to recite ancient incantations meant to summon the demon. The house trembled in response, as if the very foundations were protesting the intrusion of the supernatural. Shadows danced and converged, forming a grotesque silhouette that filled the room. Malum Vectis, Lorraine's voice resonated with power. We command you to reveal yourself. A guttural, otherworldly growl filled the room as Malum Vectis manifested in the dark form of swirling shadows. It was a grotesque presence, exuding an aura of malevolence that seemed to suck the very life from the air. Ed, holding a crucifix, stepped forward, his voice unwavering. You have no power here. We will cast you out. The demon roared, sending a shockwave through the room. The Martins, standing alongside the Warrens, felt the sheer force of the entity's malevolence, but they were not alone. They had the strength of their family bonds and the guidance of the Warrens to bolster their spirits. The Martins each confronted their own personal demons, the doubts and insecurities that had been magnified by the demon's influence. Sarah and John locked eyes, their love for one another overcoming the mistrust that had grown between them. Emily and Michael, recognizing the power of their family's unity, held hands in a silent pact of courage. The battle unfolded with an intensity that shook the very core of the Amityville horror house. The Warrens, driven by their unwavering faith, confronted the demon with prayers and holy relics. The Martins, empowered by their love for one another and their determination to protect their family, pushed back against the malevolent forces that had sought to destroy them. As the confrontation raged on, the Martins found their voices, speaking words of love and unity that drowned out the demon's tormenting whispers. Emily, with tears in her eyes, turned to her brother and said, We're a family, and nothing can tear us apart. The words pierced through the malevolence like a bolt of light, weakening the demon's grip on the Martins. Its form began to waver, its roars reduced to desperate hisses. With a final, collective effort, the Martins and the Warrens chanted incantations that banished Malum Vectis from the house. The entity screamed in fury as it was forced to retreat, vanishing into the darkness from which it had come. The room, once filled with terror, was now bathed in a soothing light. The Martins, united in their love and strength, breathed sighs of relief. The weight of the malevolence lifted from their lives. The Warrens, weary but triumphant, knew that the battle was not yet over. Malum Vectis had been banished, but its malevolence had not been eradicated. They would continue to watch over the Martin family, prepared to confront any resurgence of the ancient demon. As the Martins embraced one another, their family bond stronger than ever, the Amityville horror house began to regain its sense of peace. The battle had unfolded, and for now, the malevolent entity had been defeated. But the true test of their resolve would be in the days and nights that lay ahead, as they faced the relentless darkness that had revisited their lives. Chapter 9: The Final Exorcism. With the malevolent entity, Malum Vectis, banished from the living room, a momentary calm settled over the Amityville horror house. The Martins and the Warrens stood united, the battle of faith and willpower taking a momentary respite. However, the demon had not been vanquished. It lurked in the shadows, awaiting an opportunity to return. Ed and Lorraine Warren knew that the only way to secure the Martins' safety was to perform a powerful exorcism ritual, one that would sever the connection between the entity and the house, ensuring that it could never return. The family gathered in the living room, forming a protective circle as the Warrens began to prepare for the final exorcism. Lorraine, her eyes shining with determination, clutched a vial of holy water, while Ed held a crucifix and an ancient book of exorcism rites. The room was heavy with anticipation, the air charged with a sense of impending battle. The Martins, their resolve unwavering, clung to one another, determined to protect their family and their home. Lorraine began to chant in Latin, her voice ringing with power as she sprinkled holy water throughout the room. The sacred liquid sizzled as it touched the floor, creating a barrier against the malevolent entity. Shadows danced along the walls, growing more agitated with each word of the ancient exorcism prayer. Ed, his voice unwavering, joined in the chant. The words of the ritual echoed through the room, driving back the malevolent presence and forcing it into a corner where it writhed in fury. The Martins, their hands joined, closed their eyes, and added their voices to the chant, a chorus of love and unity that pushed back against the darkness that sought to envelop them. The final moments of the exorcism were the most intense. The room trembled as the demon fought to maintain its hold on the house. The Warrens, their voices filled with conviction, continued to recite the rites, commanding the entity to depart and leave the Amityville horror house forever. A blinding light erupted in the room as the demon was forcibly expelled. Its roars and hisses grew fainter, like a distant storm receding into the horizon. The air was charged with a sense of victory, but the Martins and the Warrens remained vigilant, knowing that they had to ensure the demon could never return. With a final, resounding prayer, the exorcism was complete. The room fell silent, and the malevolent entity was banished from the house, its connection severed. The weight of the malevolence that had haunted the Martins for so long lifted, leaving behind a sense of peace and relief. As they caught their breath, the Martins, standing hand in hand, knew that they had overcome the darkest chapter of their lives. The Amityville horror house was no longer a place of torment, but a home filled with the warmth of their love and unity. The Warrens, having fulfilled their mission, shared a final moment of satisfaction. They had faced an ancient demon and emerged victorious, their faith and expertise prevailing against the forces of darkness. The chapter of the malevolence revisited by Malum Vectis had come to an end. The Martins, their family bond stronger than ever, could finally begin the process of healing and rebuilding their lives in the house that had once been a place of horror. But the Warrens knew that the supernatural world was filled with mysteries and malevolent forces, and their journey was far from over. As they departed from the Amityville horror house, the memory of the final exorcism would stay with them as a testament to their unwavering resolve in the face of the unknown. Chapter 10: The Amityville Curse Ends. In the wake of the final exorcism, the Amityville horror house had been transformed from a place of malevolence and despair into a sanctuary of peace and healing. The dark shadow that had loomed over the Martins' lives had dissipated, and the curse that had tormented the house for decades had finally been broken. The Martins, standing together in the living room, felt a profound sense of closure. Their family bond had weathered the darkest of storms, and the love that had united them was now a beacon of light that dispelled the lingering darkness. Sarah and John, Emily, and Michael looked at one another with renewed hope, knowing that they could finally begin to rebuild their lives. The Amityville horror house, once plagued by unexplained phenomena and malevolent entities, had been transformed into a place of solace. The rooms, once haunted, now resonated with warmth and love. The weight that had burdened their home was lifted, replaced by a sense of serenity that they had longed for. As the Martins embraced the newfound peace in their lives, they couldn't help but express their gratitude to the Warrens. Ed and Lorraine had been their saviors, their unwavering determination and expertise guiding them through the darkest of times. Lorraine, her hand resting on Emily's shoulder, shared a comforting smile. Your family's strength and unity were the key to banishing the darkness from this house. It was an honor to help you. Ed, his eyes reflecting the weariness of the battle they had faced, added, Remember, love and faith are the most powerful weapons against evil. They're what ultimately triumphed over the malevolence that plagued this house. The Martins, grateful for the guidance of the Warrens, knew that their lives would never be the same. The battle against the Amityville curse had transformed them, leaving them with a renewed appreciation for their family and the strength that came from unity. As the Warrens prepared to leave Amityville, the chapter of the malevolence that had revisited their lives came to a close. The bonds that had formed in the face of the unknown had been strengthened, and the enduring battle between good and evil had left its mark on them. As they drove away from the Amityville horror house, the Martins watched in the rearview mirror as the iconic structure grew smaller in the distance. They knew that the malevolent entity was vanquished, and the curse that had haunted their home was finally broken. The enduring battle against the Amityville curse had come to an end, but the Warrens knew that their journey as paranormal investigators was far from over. They left Amityville, their bond stronger than ever, ready to face whatever darkness awaited them in the world of the supernatural. In the heart of Amityville, a place once shrouded in malevolence, a new chapter had begun. The Martins, their family now united and their home free of curses, would continue their lives, cherishing the love and strength that had seen them through the darkest of times. And so, the Amityville curse ended, a testament to the enduring battle between good and evil, and the power of love and faith to overcome even the most malevolent of forces. Hello, fellow fiction fans. I'm thrilled you're enjoying Muted Gamer Fiction. Your support means the world to me. If you're loving our stories, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement fuels our storytelling. I'd love to hear from you. Share fanfic ideas, or just say hi in the comments. Let's build this community together. Thanks for being part of Muted Gamer Fiction. Keep listening, and your support keeps the stories coming. Can't wait to see your ideas. Happy listening, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next chapter.